Hey there, I'm Vanessa, MSW, RSW, social worker in clinical practice. And today I thought I'd talk a little bit about how to talk to your kids about coronavirus. This is a question that a lot of parents are trying to figure out as coronavirus is sort of quickly unfolding and we're living through this sort of very new, different, kind of scary time at the moment. And I think a lot of parents are searching for ways to talk to their kids about this. Questions like, should I talk to my kids about coronavirus? How do I talk to my kids in a way that doesn't increase their anxiety, that helps them feel safe and secure? And so this has been a bit of an interest area of mine because prior to me being a social worker in clinical practice, I used to work in the pediatric ICU, pediatric intensive care unit. Part of my role there was to support siblings and other children who might be going into the ICU to visit their sibling or maybe a friend. And so learning how to talk to kids about illness and sickness was part of my job. And so I really felt like when this coronavirus started spreading and being a mom myself and having other mom friends who were trying to navigate this sort of new and scary situation, I thought I'd just pop on here to talk a little bit about how you can support your kids. So the first thing is it is totally okay to talk to your kids about coronavirus. Even if they're young children, having the opportunity to actually sit down and talk to your kids about something that is relevant, that is happening in our world, is very okay to talk about and to not be scared about approaching this subject. I think it's normal for parents to feel like, I might not want to talk to them about coronavirus because what if it generates new fear or new anxiety for them? That's a very normal question or worry as a parent to have. But generally, kids are very intuitive. They sense how we are. They sense what's happening around us. They sense what's happening in their environment. And sometimes when we don't have these conversations with kids, it can generate more anxiety for them. And that's not coming from a place of, if you don't talk to your kids about coronavirus, you're doing damage. It's not that at all. It's just that kids often, when they don't have enough information, make up their own ideas or their own narratives about what could be happening. Maybe they've already heard about coronavirus from a friend or at school or even preschool. They may have questions about what it is and they're not quite sure to ask you. And then if their parents aren't able to have those conversations with them, all kinds of things could be floating around in their little minds about what they think this could be. And often those ideas are inaccurate or maybe far worse than what's actually happening. So don't be afraid to talk to your kids about coronavirus. Number 2 is that you know your child best. And so with the next sort of points that I make, ultimately you know your kid best. You know their temperament best. You know what kinds of experiences they've already had with illness in their life, or maybe the context of illness in terms of other people in your family who may have been sick in the past. You already have the best radar in terms of how they understand illness. Trust what does feel right for you as a parent and use any tips that you see from me, from other people. Really know that at the end of the day, you are your child's best knowledge source and you know their needs best during this time. So stick with that. Tip number 3 is to do a check-in with yourself around your own feelings and your own anxiety around coronavirus. This is a good chance for you to check in with you and say, how am I doing with this? How am I coping with this? Am I feeling worried? Am I able to take care of myself in this process? Things like getting good sleep, eating, getting your body moving, even with things like social distancing measures in place. I think it's still important that you find creative ways to get your body moving or even getting outdoors for small increments. Obviously, if you're self-isolating or you're in quarantine, that's going to look different. But I think it's still very important to keep a check on how you're managing your own mental health through this. Now, I say this with being mindful of not putting the pressure on yourself as a parent to feel like you have to have it all together or have all of the answers. I think a lot of parents sort of feel like, I don't want to have this conversation with my kids because I'm also feeling worried and I need to stay strong. And I think there's a total difference between feeling something or having feelings or emotions or worries as a parent than being completely, I'm done with these feelings or these fears. So I think a good measurement tool to do a check-in with, how am I feeling? Am I in a good place to talk to my kids? Is asking yourself, am I in a stable enough place that I can make space to hold some of their fears or worries? Do I feel like that I can make the place and the space to do that for them, that I can be present, that I can listen, and that I can offer reassurance. And also, am I in a place that I can manage some of their questions? And that's different than having the answers to all these questions, but being able to manage some of their questions that they might have. If you feel like you're able to do that, then I think that this is an okay time for you to have a talk with your kids about coronavirus. So number 4 is ask your kids what they already know about coronavirus, or ask them if, hey, have you heard about something called coronavirus? And kind of let them lead from that place. For kids who maybe have heard about it, ask them what they already know. What do you know about it? And where did you learn about it? That can kind of help us gauge where kids are already at and what questions they might have next. If your child isn't really seemingly responding to this discussion around coronavirus, or they don't have questions around it, that's also okay. And I don't think that you need to force this conversation on them, that just by poking around a little bit and saying, hey, what do you know? Have you heard of coronavirus? And seeing how they respond, asking them what kinds of questions they have, that'll be enough to really help you with the next parts of this. So one way of explaining coronavirus is starting by simply explaining that there are good germs and there are bad germs. And the good germs can do things like help our body digest food, for example, whereas bad germs can do things to our body that can make us feel sick or have a cough or a fever. And so this is a really great tool that I found on the internet. I'll link it in the description. Has a picture of sort of good germs and bad germs. And I really like that because really helps kids understand and process when they can have a visual attached to it. So just by laying out there are good germs and bad germs, and to explain that coronavirus is one of those bad germs, and that coronavirus belongs to a family of germs called a virus. And so what you can explain is that coronavirus is a new virus. So doctors and scientists are still learning lots of information about how the coronavirus makes us feel. What we do know is that coronavirus can make us get sick, just like any other cold or flu might make us get sick. So it could make us cough or have a fever. Kids are pretty egocentric and trying to understand how this relates to them. And so kids might ask the question around, what if I get coronavirus, or what if I get sick? And so to explain to them that what we know right now about coronavirus is typically kids don't get coronavirus, but if they do get coronavirus, it's usually very mild. And what mild means is you don't get that sick if you have coronavirus. It might be very similar to other times that you've been sick, where you've had a cold or a flu. Maybe you've taken some medication to help with your fever, and that typically you feel better within a couple days. So things like rest and drinking lots of water and medication to help with their fever would be a way that they could help themselves feel better if they were to get coronavirus. So you can imagine the next question with that is, what if my parent or my caregiver gets coronavirus? And you can explain to your kids as well that most people who get coronavirus, the case is usually pretty mild. The same things like resting or taking some medication to help with fever, those are things that adults can also do, and that anybody who has coronavirus can get help from a doctor to help them feel better. Kids might also have questions around, will I be able to go to school? And one way of approaching this question is to say that doctors and scientists are still learning about coronavirus, and they're still telling us that right now it's probably best for us to not go to the places that we normally go to, like school, or to public places like the mall or their favorite store, or places where there's lots of people there, because we're trying to do our absolute best to keep people safe, to help it stop from spreading to person. And so you can explain to them that this is one of the things that we're trying to do to help slow down the spread of coronavirus, to help it slow down a little bit more, and that we can figure out a way to stop it. You can explain to them we don't know exactly when we'll be able to go back to school. It might be a few days, it might be a few weeks, and that as soon as we hear more information about when it's safe for us to go back to school, we'll be able to tell you about that as soon as we know. And if you have any more questions about that, you can always come and ask mommy or daddy or whoever is your caregiver to ask more about that. And this might be a great time to talk to your kids about what they can do to help in this situation, which is to do things like washing their hands. The importance of washing your hands for at least 20 seconds is a really important skill and practice that they can engage in. So they sort of feel like they have a bit of an entry point here in terms of how they can help, and that they can help generate ideas of things that they can do from home while they're in this waiting period of not being able to go back to school, that they can help generate lots of ideas of fun things that they can do at home or in places that are safe to go to, places that don't have a lot of people. They can generate some of those ideas, and you guys can work on coming up a list of fun things they can do as a family during this time. And so one of the last points here is to talk about reassurance and routine. So especially during a period of like uncertainty and newness and scariness, it's really important that you try to create a bit of a routine and structure. I mean, I say this, I've seen lots of things going around on Instagram about structures and routines for your kids. And I think all that stuff can be great and can sort of help us generate a bit of an idea of what that might look like. But I think to simplify it in terms of, just offering like normal wake up time, a little bit of unstructured play time, a little bit of safe outdoor time, again, depending on if anybody in your house is having to self-isolate, if you're not, and depending on what city you live in, if it's okay for you to still go outdoors into less crowded places, doing a little bit of that, meals and snacks, a bedtime routine. Those are all kind of like basic things. So you don't feel like you have to go overboard with like creating this like highly intense routine or structure. Just try to keep things relatively similar. If your kids are typically in school, imagine what their summers typically look like when they're not in school. Kind of use that as like a bit of a model or a framework. The last point is to model reassurance. So again, it doesn't mean that even if you're feeling sad or worried or upset that there isn't a part of you that can also offer reassurance. So there's a place for you to hold both spaces. You can also be feeling a lot of things, but also be able to tap into the part of you that feels, we're going to be okay. And my kids need to hear that from me, that, hey, this is a new time. We're trying to figure this out, but we're going to be okay. And we're here to support you and to love you and to take care of you, to make sure you've got food and toys to play with, especially for younger kids. Like, they just want to know concretely, like, are my toys here? Am I going to have my snacks? Can I still sleep in my bed? Younger kids are really concrete in that kind of thinking. So just to go with the basis on that, on those basic things. It might be a good time to reflect on times as a family when you've been through something hard. Like maybe you ran out of gas last year on the highway. And remember that time we had to sort of pull over and we had to wait for help, and then we got help and we were okay. We got back together, and now we have this story of us living through something kind of challenging. And so to be able to reflect on other things that they've maybe been through, even a time that they were maybe sick and that they got better. And so to understand that situations ebb and flow. And that's the same with our feelings and our emotions, that emotions are transient. Even feelings like sadness or worry, being able to kind of experience that as like a wave. Feelings come and go. When we're feeling, anxious or worried, that we can do things to slow our breathing down, to help us feel comforted, talking to your mom or dad, also reminding them about things like, FaceTime or Skype, and the importance of staying connected to other people in their family is a really good way to help us feel more connected to one another during this time. And so my last point in this video is to really just speak to you in terms of coping with uncertainty. This is a time of major uncertainty. Am I going to be able to return to my job? When is life going to get back to normal? When are my kids going to be able to go back to school? When will I know that it feels safe outside? These are a lot of big questions, and facing this kind of uncertainty can really be heavy. And so I think one way of working with this uncertainty is just by acknowledging that there are things that are just outside of our control. Being able to know, what are the things right now that I do have control over? What are the things that I just simply don't have control over? Is there a way of me acknowledging the things that I can't control in this like compassionate way of saying, man, this is really hard to face this, the not knowing. And these things are outside of my control. And man, this is hard. But to practice an acceptance towards, they're simply out of my control, and I'm going to do what I can to focus on what is in my control and caring for myself and just attending to my own emotions. There was a quote that I read today actually on Instagram. Now I'm going to get it. So the quote is by Dr. Stacy Shell. She is, I believe, a psychologist in Toronto. And she had shared a quote, a gentle reminder that allowing yourself to feel whatever emotions are coming up for you now might actually help you to re-regulate. Feeling our emotions can help allow the body to release them. So I won't go on a big tangent about that, but I think that just by simply allowing our emotions to be there, to notice them, to give them space, is a way of us actually caring for ourselves and not pushing down what's happening, but just to experience them like a wave, to experience them with an attitude of compassion and acceptance. This is how I'm doing, this is what I'm feeling, is your way for me to care for myself in this time right now. So I hope that was helpful for you today. I hope that you're hanging in there during this time of lots of uncertainty, lots of unknowing, and I hope that in the next few weeks and few months that we can really kind of flatten this curve out here with coronavirus, and that we can return to life, and that we can maybe return to life with a renewed sense of gratitude for the things that we've actually been away from for the last few weeks and few months. So take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.